All right, thanks, councillors. Thanks, staff, for joining us for our second day of our long-term plan deliberations. So we will reconvene the meeting. It is 9:36 a.m. on the 28th of May. We'll start with Karakia.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia makinakina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai, e he aka ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora.
Thank you very much. All right, apologies. Have we got any apologies for today? Any early departures? We know if Councillor Mahuta is going to join us. She will be here? Okay. All right, might just be running late. No apologies?
Oh, it's just contingent on when we actually finish,
Yeah,
whether I'm going to make an apology.
okay. We'll remain optimistic. We will remain optimistic. We made great headway yesterday, I think, and so I think that I'm looking positively. I'm seeing visions of a midday. Let's all hold that optimistically in our minds. Okay, so what we still have to do, we're still sort of midway on the other feedback. We have the chief executive's submission to work through. We also have the Karaka consultation, as well as working through the restoration of Waikato Tainui settlement lands. So my intention is we'll get through all of that, and then we will take a break. And when we come back, that's when we'll be our decision-making mode. All right. Okay, Chief Executive. No, nobody wants to take this one?
Not. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. So page 229 of your agenda is the Chief Executive's submission, which was presented to you through hearings. This is the capture, I guess, of things that have changed since the draft long-term plan was adopted. And the key matters are all set out in the report there. While we normally work really hard to make sure that the CE submission is budget neutral, so that we're not having any impact on the position that Council has reported through the draft LTP, there is some uplift, particularly in year 2 of the budget as a result of this submission. I think, as we discussed on the day at hearings, those changes are predominantly around public transport and the recognition of the provisions that we need to make for driver wages. The one matter that was noted in the report for consideration of Council, but for which we haven't made any assumptions or provision, was the market information in relation to staff salaries. So we have very recently received the market movement information to the 31st of March 2024. So it's measuring the year on which we base remuneration for staff from the 1st of July. That's indicating a market movement of 5.1%, whereas we have 4.5% provided in the budget. The gap between those figures has been costed at an additional 320,000. So as I say, we just want to highlight that for you. We have made no assumption about it, but obviously would appreciate some consideration of that matter if it's appropriate.
Sorry, point of clarification. So the slide that's in front of us shows a set of numbers in terms of total rates. That's different from what's in the report. that's different from what was put in front of council at the start of yesterday. So just wanting clarity again on what's.
Yeah, certainly. These numbers are what, in between the hearings and now, we have put all of the changes that we requested through the Chief Executive submission back through the budget model, so that we're really clear on exactly where that lands. So those are those numbers up there. So I think year one is sort of 6.2 versus 6.3 in the report. Year two goes up to from 8.8 up to 9%. So some differences from what we had estimated when we prepared the Chief Executive submission.
Okay, but the slide that was put in front of us at the start of
yeah,
yesterday had a 7 point.
Yes, yeah. So the figures that I presented at the beginning of the meeting was inclusive of both the Chief Executive submission plus the recommendations based on consultation that have been made. So key differences were the increase in the natural heritage rate, as well as recognising the funding impact of the NZTA board decision on Te Huia. So those figures were the all-in. If council accepted all of the recommendations contained in the agenda, that would be where you were sitting. And obviously there's some choices that you'll want to make around that.
Okay. Yeah.
Do we take any notice of this one, or do
Yeah.
we take notice of the one that we got yesterday with, in which
So-
it's going to be adjusted?
So through the chair, what I've tried to do with this is to quantify the impact of the changes that have been identified by staff as being needed to the draft LTP. So that's just to say this is the impact of the Chief Executive submission.
Based on council's preferred options that we went out with on the LTP,
Yes,
not
this is-
where we might be landing now.
No, so this is purely the draft LTP with the changes that have been requested through the Chief Executive submission put back through the budget model. So that's all those numbers are. The other numbers that we talked about at the beginning of yesterday are the all-in numbers of CE submission plus the recommendation that's in the agenda around the $15 natural heritage rate, plus recognition of the NZTA board funding decision on Te Huia. So all of those decisions all of those positions were reflected in the budget impact that was shown at the very beginning of yesterday.
Got it.
So yesterday's one is the complete picture. This is, we're only talking CE submission here. So, but there are some cost drivers that are sitting within the CE submission that are contributing to the overall position.
Okay, and I do want to come back to the conversation around the salaries, just so that council is quite clear on what's being proposed. But so just signaling that, Councillor Hughes.
A point of clarification. Yesterday, I asked that the resolution that we had regarding the Te Huia and the government funding had a nil impact on rates. And I understood that was what the resolution is going to say. From what I'm hearing now, there is an impact on rates.
I don't know that that's what the resolution will say.
Well,
I
that's what
understand
that's
that. I understand that you
That's right.
expressed a desire to see that in there, and as what I saw from our CFO was some concern about that wording. But I'll let you comment.
So through the chair, over the first 2 years of the long-term plan, we have been able to offset that reduction in the NZTA subsidy by utilising the reserve. But we can only do that in full for the first 2 years. So there is an impact
In year 3.
beyond that, which we will be consulting before we get to
Before
that
we get to
point.
that.
So we're not approving that at this point when we get to the stage of approving a long-term plan.
Well, you will be approving that budget position in terms of the whole long-term plan. But equally, as I think we have captured, you would be going and consulting on it in terms of at the end of the trial period. So A, has the trial been deemed successful? And B, then if it is, assuming that it is, are people willing to continue to pay for that with the subsidy rate dropping further to the 51%? So we have to have something assumed in the budget. We've assumed it carries on and we've assumed it's at 51%, but there are checkpoints along the way before you're actually committing to that.
So can I ask that be encapsulated in that resolution when we come to pass it, please?
We'll work our way through that
Okay.
yeah. Councillor Dunbar Smith.
Yeah, just to follow up what Noel's saying, there is also 1.5 million in CapEx expenses for the European Track Control System coming in 2025-26, which NZTA funds 900,000 of, so the 600,000. Some of that will have an impact on rates because there'll be some degree of borrowing.
Correct. So that will be funded through borrowing, and I think we've got a 50-year life estimated on that stuff. Yeah. So there is an impact, but it's relatively minor when you sort of put it out over a long period of time.
Yeah, and my question, I think to Phil before, was couldn't we use some of the 506,000 that's sitting there in year 3 to pay for that?
Yes, potentially. Yeah.
Okay.
We haven't assumed that at the moment. We've assumed that that 500 in year 3 is going to offset that reduction in the NZTA subsidy, because that's a bigger gap probably to bridge. But again, we can look at that when we get closer to that time.
Secondly, in the information we got on 6th of May, the CE was predicting a 6.3 rate in 2024 and an 8.8. Where's the 1.1 and 0.2% come from? Why has it gone down in one and up in another?
So through the chair, the figures that were presented in the CE submission were the calculations in a spreadsheet of estimating the impact of those changes. What I've worked with the team to do in the intervening period is to put all of that through the budget model so that we have a reliable starting point for the conversations for today. So there's no other changes per se that have gone through. It was an estimation of the impact versus the numbers actually having gone through the great washing machine of the whole budget model to land it at the position that's reported up there.
Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just check with the CE that point 32 in his report, around the 170,000 required for Coromandel area, Graham's Creek, is actually a mistake and it is not required?
Correct. Yes, so
It is correct.
Yeah, so through the chair, that has actually been, the capital expenditure has been taken out and changes that I've tracked subsequent to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that has been noted. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions with regard to the chief executive? Oh, can we just circle back to the wages thing or the
So,
salaries, staff salary? Can you just talk us through what has been provided for, what the market is saying, what the gap is, what the recommendation is?
Yeah, so Chris, do you want to do that or do you want me to do?
Oh, I'll have a go and you can correct me if I get it wrong. So the most recent information, which was at the 31st of March from Strategic Pay, was that salary inflation continued at 4.5% over the most recent quarter. And that's the assumption that we've used going into here. I think I indicated during the hearings that we currently, this year, in applying the salary, that we still have a slight gap of about 1.1% to the market. Whether that will correct it will depend on where the salary inflation goes in the next year. And there's been all sorts of predictions of what would happen in the last half year or so, and that hasn't been borne out by the data, but we can only crystal ball what will happen going forward. And Janine, when we apply it, we will use the current data at the time to apply to the salary information. Correct.
Yes, so the modelling that we're currently doing in terms of staff remuneration from the 1st of July is always based on the quarter to March, because obviously there's a bit of a lag in actually getting that information, and then the ability to actually pay that out. So the latest information that we have in terms of the movement from 31st of March 2023 to the 31st of March 2024 is a 5.1% movement in terms of the market reference point that council uses for staff rem.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Chief Executive, what's the average number of vacancies held at any one time within the organisation?
So the average over what period of time, I'm not too sure you're asking, but I think the most recent average has been about 12.7% in that vicinity.
12% of the vacancy, and the budget is normally budgeted for 100%.
No.
No, it's not.
So what
No,
is
it's
the
not.
basis of the budget?
So we discount our salary budget provision for 10% turnover and a 10-week lag, so that there will be a 10-week gap between somebody leaving the organisation and somebody coming. So
20%.
so we've actually, well, it's 10% of sort of 10%. It's not 10 plus 10. It's 10% turnover, and then we will have 10 weeks where those 10% of people aren't in the building.
Yeah, so 10% of 10 weeks is 20% of a salary. Yeah, so what I'm saying is there a need to fund at that rate? So the difference could be absorbed without provisioning for more.
Hear what you're saying. I think the point I made before, with the way it's currently been funded in the past, has left us at a gap of 1.1% behind the market.
So to close that gap is the $320,000.
Councillor Dunbar Smith.
Yeah, just to clarify, Chris, so at the moment you use the 31st of March as your baseline for pay in June, July.
Yes, that's the case. Yep.
Now, what you're saying is that currently is at 5.1%. But the budget set here in the rates is 4.5. So if we don't choose to increase the rates, do you stick to the 4.5 or do you increase it automatically to 5.1?
No, we only have budget that we have. We can't spend more than our budget.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Downard.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, everyone deserves, for the work that they get, more money, but I'm still concerned that this rate is creeping over the 7%. We went out to the ratepayers at 6%, and we're going to have some hard deliberations whether we incorporate all these CEs submissions into it to keep it. I'd like to keep it under 7%. So I'm open, but there's going to be some hard chewing the fat. I believe, we owe it to the ratepayers to bring it down to as close to that 6% that we went out to. A big proportion of ratepayers are pensioners now, and our proportion in New Zealand is getting bigger and bigger in that age group. Their superannuation, their pension doesn't go up by inflation. It doesn't go up hardly anything. So that's all I've got to say.
So just in reference to that, if we are thinking about the numbers that were put in front of us, which incorporated all of the recommendations, because the CE submissions are really about sort of budgetary tweaks and things like that,
yeah.
where corrections in calculations, refinement of the budgeting. Where the real rate impact is is on the response to some of the proposals. For instance, the natural heritage
heritage.
rate going to 15, that has a,
Appreciate that, Madam Chairman, but it all adds up.
yeah,
You know,
and
it's
I
not-
understand
not
that.
across the
I'm just
council, you know, it's only
highlighting
a
for
couple of-
counselors
Couple
where
of
the,
cups of coffee.
where it
but
lies.
all adds up.
I,
you know.
I didn't say anything
Yeah.
about coffee.
I
What I'm
appreciate
saying
where
is,
this comes
yeah.
from, and it's, you know, as I say, it's just, you know, some of the budgets, you know, through out of concern, the drivers, 2 million there and stuff like that. But what I'm saying is that we're going to have to make some hard decisions to whether, you know, the majority say that 7% is fine, but, you know, but it's going to be hard out there. You know, we've got to hear the people, you know, even though we've had 1,800 submissions and, you know, a couple of hundred of them came in and spoke to us. That's still, you know, 218,000 ratepayers out there that are struggling.
All right. Any other questions on the CE submission? If not, what have we got Marakaraka?
So I think we've got-
So this is on page 243. Sorry, yes, go ahead,
Just
Councillor
ask
Smith.
questions on the IRS computers and then.
Oh,
Iris.
Iris?
Iris, yeah.
I know.
What did I say?
IRS.
IRS. Yeah, IRS. Well, yeah. Yeah, I've just been, yeah. Okay, so I'm just concerned that, yeah, have we got, this is on page 231 of, 231. Have we really got a handle on these costs? Because these should have been known, surely.
I-
230.
One at the bottom of the page, resource use.
Through you, Chair, I don't think we've got Brent, who's our project
It's probably
sponsor.
on a
but
plane somewhere, is it?
Not yet, no, he's meeting with one of the district council chief executives at the moment, just up the corridor. The IRIS project is an inter-regional council project, which this council committed to on the last tradium, was it, Janine? And it was committed to go into as a contractual obligation. My understanding is that the Regional Sector Holdings Limited that is running that project, they've come back with adjusted forecast. Janine, you might be able to put a bit more flesh around it.
Yeah, so through the chair, the the cost increases within the project are within the contractual provisions that are there with the vendor to develop the system. There have been some delays though. It's probably not unusual with IT projects. And so that means that both the implementation or the development of the software, the timeframe is extended, as is our timeframe around implementation. And both of those things have a cost impact. I think the program team are working very hard to work on how we can work more collaboratively with other councils who are going live. So for example, Bay of Plenty and ourselves, Bay of Plenty Regional Council and ourselves will be going live at the same time. So rather than replicating or duplicating a lot of effort, there's active conversations around how we can divide that up. So everything gets done, but we're doing some and Bay of Plenty are doing some, and we can take joint assurance from that. But the reality at the moment is we have some increased costs in that program.
And so I suppose my concern is, do we come back at the annual plan next year and there's more costs and then more costs? Page. Just, or maybe I've made the point and we'll move on. I don't like you shortly, won't we, Michael?
Councillor Hughes.
Look, I think Janine summed the position very succinctly. IT projects always go over. Whenever you approve an IT project, you should expect at least a 25% overrun, and that's if it's being well controlled and managed. And I sit on the major projects committee. With this one's on that committee's agenda. It's getting due scrutiny every month, reports coming through, and we've asked for additional information in those reports to make sure that we understand exactly what's going on and what council's obligations are going forward. Unfortunately, the company that's got the contract for this, they are the biggest and the best to do this sort of work. And basically, you don't have a lot of control over what they do and what it costs. And that's just the nature of the beast. So I'd be assured that there is significant scrutiny being subjected to this. And Janine, I think, has done a great job in terms of seeing the reboot project through, and I've got confidence that we'll have something. I know Brent's in charge of this, but Janine's got some oversight there as well. So.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Yeah, one comment and two questions. The comment is, yet again, we've got an unfunded mandate with 2.4 million for the bus drivers that the government was going to pay and has now been withdrawn. Is that correct? Was going to be funded by the Climate Emergency Response Fund?
So I'll get Phil to respond to that one.
Morena koutou. Just thought I'd say a few words on the bus driver wages because I suspected it might come up. So the report to council in November 2022 supported a driver wage uplift to $28 per hour, following support from the government via the Climate Emergency Relief Fund of $61 million. That report noted that the agreement reached at the time may need to be revisited as driver expectations and national standards for wages and conditions continue to evolve. And our contribution at that time was matched by the operator. That report also stated that increased costs in future years would be managed via the annual plan or long-term plan process with options to approve the increase or provide a lower level of service. We did undertake that in the 2023-2024 annual plan process. And in that report in February 2023, $2.3 million was added to the budget. That was approved at the time, noting the Crown subsidy was due to end at that time in March 2023. In order to fund that, there was a reduction in the provision of new services by $1 million. The new government in October 2023 decided to stop the Transport Choices programme, which was funded by that Climate Emergency Relief Fund. The LTP numbers as per January 2024 reflected an assumption of the continuation of that fund. We have since been advised by the agency staff that we need to include a greater proportion of the costs within our continuous programme bid, and that's the adjustment you see in the submission. Identical to the process we followed for the 2023-24 annual plan, there is a consequential impact on the PT targeted rate, which is reflected in the submission. Again, consistent with that approach, we have worked hard to mitigate the impacts of that by the reduction that you see in the low-cost, low-risk programme that's proposed. So this has occurred late, but it is reflective of changes that have occurred nationally during the development of the long-term plan process. And the approach we've taken is consistent with the approach we've followed in previous years.
I'm just wondering whether we can highlight that. It's an unfunded mandate we've been lagged with again. And the other question I had was 35. Submission proposes a rephasing of EV fleet infrastructure, but no indication of what the costs are. Yes, sorry, might not fall under you.
No, that's
Go away.
that's not public transport.
Don't go away.
Do we have any idea of the costs of the rephasing?
Can I come back to you with that number?
Sure.
I'll find it.
And finally, just 4,000 additional for a whistleblower service subscription. Has it ever been used?
Sorry, what page are we at?
No, number
Oh.
23.
Right.
Additional $4,000 per annum for council's whistleblower service subscription.
Through the chair, it has been used once.
Once.
So this is part of our protected disclosures framework in terms of from a fraud risk management perspective. So this the service allows staff to make anonymous notifications through PricewaterhouseCoopers of events that they are concerned with. that gives us the opportunity to investigate them, but provides the protections for those staff and as a protected disclosure.
And that's an additional 4,000. So what's the actual?
No, so 4,000 is the
4,000,
cost that
right.
was just omitted from the budget in error.
Just
Oh,
curious.
sorry, I've got a line up here.
I don't understand that one.
Because I have some, you might stay there, Phil, because I just want to make sure I'm clear on some PT stuff. So I've got Councillor Marr, Smith, Hughes, Graff, and Kneebone. Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a big submission. Just jumping back to Iris, just confidence. I know we've got an implementation figure in there, Janine. And that's going to be rolled out across a number of different departments. Just concern around staff ability to meet that. You know, is there enough? And I know there's concern across some of the departments that it's going to take staff off business as usual. So.
Yeah, so through the chair, and I think that's some of the rhetoric that has been provided through the key projects reference group.
Yeah.
The budget does provide for backfilling of key staff, but yeah, experience would tell me that can be really difficult to reprioritise in terms of that type of project versus BAU activity. But there is provision that's made and intent to be able to do that. So we don't drop the ball in terms of BAU and we can adequately support the outcomes of the project.
So that is factored in.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Can we go back to Ben's questioning in relation to public transport, please? Regional transport connections, page 233. So we've got to offset the 2 million net cost of this bus drivers. There's been some tweaking and as set out in paragraph 26. I'm looking to understand whether those savings offset are ongoing. And I'm also really concerned that somewhere down the line, that money's going to have to come, and it's going to come from rating.
The money
No,
for wages or the money
wages.
for the?
Yeah, well, no, to the cost of drivers. So is this what we're talking about? The drivers, the cost of additional money. And basically one of the first decisions we made when we came on council. And we all had, well, many of us had concerns about the enduring costs of that, because that would not just be a one-off. So what's the cost in those out years there, which we just do not focus on? And that's the one thing I struggle with this LTP, is that in every other council that I've seen, they do make an attempt to see what those costs are for that 10 years. We're not.
I think the difficulty with PT is that we get no commitment from NZTA beyond 3 years.
Appreciate that, but the reality is PT is here to stay. The government is not going to come along and say there's not going to be a public transport system in this country. There'd be hell to play. There wouldn't be a government for very long. So what is the true cost in out years in the budget? So if we're offsetting this now, when does it really bite? Because if you have to find another $2 to $3 million in, say, year 3 or year 4, that's going to take a big whack there. So I want to tell the truth to the public and say, this is the real impact of what this is all about. And using reserves, offsettings and all that, it's great for the here and now, but it's what's going to kick in and bite the bullet, because at some stage, 2 or 3 of these are going to come together and it's going to be 5 or 10% bang. So please, can I have some understanding of what is the true, if we deal with it and hide the problem, and I don't mean that in a perhaps we just deal with the problem now and put it off to another day. I want to know what the other day means.
So through the chair, I think one of our key constraints is actually the other funder in this conversation, which is NZTA.
Yeah.
But I think we've got to make an assumption that 51% is going to be there, and because it's been there for a long time.
So that is the assumption that we have built into the plan. But if we think the low cost, low risk program, we have always said that the year 2 program is quite ambitious, and with NZTA funding approval, we're probably not actually going to get there. but we still have provision made in the budget for it.
So is this 2 point, was it the offset of, looking for the 2.4 million? So the offset, is that an enduring offset or not? Because if it's not an enduring offset, then it's going to come back to bite.
But so the 51%, yes, we can agree that that's the level at which NZTA will traditionally fund. It's what they apply that 51% to that is ambiguous, because one government may prioritize public transport and say, yes, we're going to apply that 51% across multiple routes, let's say. But another government might say, well, no, we're not going to apply that 51% to all of those. We're going to apply it to this.
And what
That's
likely
where
cases-
it's central government policy that drives the parts of the public transport system that they are willing to invest in. And as far as I can see, what is our avenue as a council to predict what that might be?
But the issue, Madam Chair, is it's 51%. And if we know what the 51% is, and so
No,
drivers.
but we don't know what the
Yes,
51%
because
is.
51% is the figure of whatever it is.
Yeah, but
So
we don't know whatever it
no,
is.
that doesn't matter. It doesn't
Well,
matter.
it does, though, as
No,
far as I can see.
It's 51%. So if you assume that with a basis of inflation at around whatever the 5-year average is, you can predict out within some certainties. And so to not see that impact of that in the out years, I think it's problematic.
Can I maybe help with
okay.
that? The report notes
What
bullet
paragraph,
point
please?
27. Net cost savings of 757 have been identified from the low risk program in year 1.
And that's one of my questions. Is that identified?
It's
for
only
year
in
two,
year 1.
4? It's only year 1, isn't it?
That's correct. That's what's stated in the report.
Yeah.
Savings, what constitutes those savings? Are you looking at the GPS and saying NZTA is probably not going to have an appetite to fund these types of public transport?
Yeah.
So I've said several times that the government policy statement that came out from the new government included a reduction of funding for public transport services nationally, even at the upper bound. Our focus has been on protecting the continuous programme of services, which are the long-term contracts that we have in place. And even those may be vulnerable to decisions that the agency are making right now. In addition, we have a very large new services and enhanced services programme funded by what we've described as low cost, low risk, where we get money on a 3-year rotating basis that we have to reapply for. We suspect that the first cuts that will be made will be to that program, and I've said this before. The savings that we've identified come from that program, and they are for services where we collect the rates, because we can't make decisions on behalf of other councils and the rates that they would pay us.
I'm not sure that you're grasping what I'm saying, or else I'm not grasping what you're saying. So let's try and nut it down. So that's for the year 1. Got a saving of 757 here, and you've got the public transport budgets that show using reserves of 1.3 million this year. So what is the impact in year 2 on the rates in year 3 and year 4 going out? That's what I want to understand, because to only have year 1 really addressed.
Everyone's relieved. That's the table on page 234 of the agenda, which shows the public transport changes. So across expenditure, the reduction in that's right, Phil? No, that's the change. So that's the increased costs that we see coming through in terms of the driver wages and how that is proposed to be funded. So that's the rating impact of what's been requested through the Chief Executive submission.
So that jumps up to 5.9 from 2.7 in the second year. So is that additional two reflected and up there?
Yes, it is. That's why we see year 2 increase the 6.2 to 9%.
And is it included in all those out years?
Yes, it is.
How can it be?
So you found some savings for year 1, but those savings don't endure in year 2. Is that because there are planned services that are coming in year 2 that you don't see the reduction in investment impacting on?
The statements are in the report. Those are the savings in year 1. We don't yet know what the government's decisions will be around the programme for years 2, 3 and on. So on that basis, the numbers here reflect that goes on the rates.
I think Councillor Smith has been suggesting that instead of, if I got this right, instead of assuming nothing, that there's an assumption that something will continue. Now, I don't know if that's a good, valid assumption or not. But that's what you're suggesting, isn't it, into the out years?
Yeah, but buses are going to continue some way or another, whether they've reduced or otherwise, but there's still got to be a 51%, a fair assumption of 51% of a level of service the government will fund through the NZTA. Whether it's 100% of what we've got now or 50%, I don't know.
So that's our baseline assumption in
Yeah.
terms of public transport services, bus services, is ongoing funding at 51%. The question and the uncertainty that we have is what's that program that's being funded? So as Phil said, focus or priority has been given to the ongoing program, the continuous program, with the low cost, low risk being the area of uncertainty as to whether we will get anything funded there or not, but we don't know that at the moment.
So
And this is the challenge that we have every LTP, I think, that our planning is slightly out of step time-wise with NZTA's.
Janine, I think that Councillor Smith's suggesting we add more into the rates to allow for it.
Well,
Is that we're advocating for, Councillor
the
Smith?
issue is,
Allow, I'm sorry, so I'm confused in terms of
No.
what's the more that we're allowing for.
what I'm saying is with the bus, you've got two issues now. You've got the bus drivers, the enduring cost of that. So that's got to have been reflected in these budgets in the out years. This low cost, whatever it is, did we only have funding for 1 year? Or was there, I would have thought the low cost services would have been more than 1 year. Or we had a 3 years. So is year 1 of the LTP the 3rd year of the low cost scheme?
No, I think year 2 is year 1. Yeah.
So, normally they're in LTP cycles, and therefore 3 years would have been 3 years of that, or it might have started. So what are the 3 years of that program?
That's the misalignment of our 3 years that we look at and the 3 years that NZTA looks at.
So the 3-year timeframes are aligned. Our year 1, 2, 3 is their year 1, 2, 3. But we are doing a process through the Regional Land Transport Plan and through the agency's funding systems in parallel with everything that we're doing for the long-term plan, with them advising their decisions 3 months later after you've adopted the LTP.
So I'm sorry, I want to just label this a little bit more. It's their funding matches our LTP. So you're suggesting in year 1 they're going to cancel a 3-year program, and therefore the 3-year program won't exist. Is that what you're saying?
So when they make their decisions on the funding for public transport services nationally, and we hope to hear that alongside the release of the final government policy statement later in June, but they will tell us what they will fund for 3 years.
Right. Okay. I'm starting to get it. Sorry to labour it, but.
But I just want to be clear, what are you advocating for in terms of some sort of a change here?
No, I wanted to understand that if this funding has been found in year 1, and my understanding of the NZTA funding and the likes is normally on a 3-year cycle to match an LTP. Therefore, why isn't there funding in year 2 and year 3 that we have provision for that is not available to come out and be a savings against the budget, which would reduce the rate increase? Have I got that completely wrong? So if you've got a 3-year cycle and you've only found savings in year 1, where's year 2 and year 3 of the program? Why isn't there savings there that we could also pull in and lodge against this to reduce? Take it offline and come back. No.
All right. Okay,
Well,
where am I?
I want an answer.
Yeah, yeah.
Someday. Take up too much more time.
All right. Sorry, I'm just checking in if we're going to come back with something on that.
Through the chair, I think it might be easier maybe if Bill and Councillor Smith have a conversation around that to make sure that that understanding is clear.
If it becomes material for the decisions that need to be made today, that will need to occur when you adjourn, I think, a bit later. Because the impact of it would be if council chose to forecast a potential outcome that the government might make a decision on later on and build it in, that will obviously have a positive impact on the rates going forward.
But then we have to debate the risks in making that assumption. If there are any, which there may not be.
And and I guess remembering that we will, before you actually get to 25, 26, we will understand what those programs look like. So from an LTP perspective, definitely needing to signal those rating impacts. But obviously, depending on where that funding lands, we'll know that before you're actually setting the budget firmly for 25, 26 and the rates associated with it.
See appropriate wording in the LTP decision documents or the release of it that covers this off.
All right, I've got Councillor Hughes, Graf, Kneebone, Mahuta, and Cookson. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm on a similar vein to Councillor Smith. I know it sounds laborious, but I'd like confirmation that our budgets in toto reflect business as usual, and they're based on existing government policy plus policy changes that have already been signalled from Wellington. In other words, we're not building in any, maybe this is going to happen or maybe that's going to happen. Whatever we understand is going to be the future position based on the policy announcements which have been made by the government. So if there are any changes like the payroll, we know that was a short-term subsidy. That's been built in here. There's no fudging it, no using reserves, so that councillors know exactly what the potential impact is. That inflation has been applied to those future numbers. And that's been based on the bill figures, as I understand it. So it is a no surprise. I know going out 10 years is hopeless. You can't budget that far out. But at least it can give us an indication of what the trends are going to be in terms of rates. But it must be business as usual. Thanks.
Councillor Graf. You good? Councillor Kneebone? You good? Councillor, I don't know. Councillor Mahuta, did you have a comment?
No, the clarification I was trying to bring has already been sorted by the CFA into the last debate. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Cookson.
In answer, I just want to support Chris and Councillor Hughes and Councillor Smith. Totally agree.
All right. So that's it on the chief executive.
Yeah, Madam Chair, can I just provide Councillor Dunbar-Smith with the answer that he was wanting around the EV infrastructure? So the change that we see being reflected is the bringing forward of 222,000 of capital expenditure from across the term of the LTP into year one. And then there's operating costs of between $8,500 and $15,000 per annum for that. So that's reflecting the pace at which we've actually been able to, I guess, convert our vehicle fleet to EV hybrid vehicles.
So basically it's purchase of a couple of two or three.
It's the charging infrastructure
charging,
and that type
right.
of thing. Yeah.
Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just ask the CE and the directors that are in the room, is there anything else that's not in here? Is there anything that they're aware of that's coming up? I just remember coming into our triennium, we were asked about the vessel and updating that, obviously driver wages, et cetera, et cetera. Is there anything that they are aware of that could possibly affect this? I'm just not picking on PT, Phil, but we spoke about rebranding the buses and stuff like that. I don't see that in here, and it may have been ruled out, I'm not sure. But is there anything else that they are aware of that could possibly affect this budget going forward? Sounds like a no.
Inflationary impacts, what happens in the world.
Let me give you a crystal ball.
No, I think that we've probably tried to signal whatever we can into the Chief Executive's submission. You did ask a question of other directors, so just checking if any of them are going to want to put their hand up.
Gives me confidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We're now going to go to page 243, which is the outcome of the Karaka supplementary water take consultation. I understand we have Sarah Leyland
Yeah, and
online.
Greg Ryan's online as well.
Kia ora, Sarah.
Oh, thank you, Chair Story. Kia ora tātou, Chair and Councillors. So I will just briefly talk you through a few key points on the Karaka supplementary water take consultation outcome. So alongside our long-term plan process, we consulted with the identified Karaka beneficiaries, of which there were 14 landowners. We put 3 options forward to the landowners, and the summary of that consultation information is on page 250 of the agenda. Option 1 is that Council continue to manage the supplementary water take and establish a 100% direct beneficiary rate. Option 2 being that Council transfer the water take infrastructure and the associated resource consent application to the beneficiary landowners at Karaka. And option 3 is decommissioning of that supplementary water take and withdrawing of the consent application. We received 7 submissions in total, and all of these were in favour of option 2, being the transfer to beneficiary landowners. And, on this basis, it's recommended that Council do proceed with option 2 to undertake this transfer during year 1 of the LTP. And happy to take any questions.
Any questions in relation to the item? Nope. All good? Happy with the recommendation? Just looking for nods. Anybody unhappy with the recommendation that's been put forward? Nope. Good. Okay. Hey, thank you, Sarah. Are you with us for the next one as well? Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
So the next item, councillors, is on page 252. This is the restoration of Waikato Tainui settlement lands.
Madam Chair, just going back to the previous, sorry.
Sorry, yes.
one, no, well, it's a decision required. Do we not need to move a motion and,
Oh,
oh, you're going to do it at the end?
we're
I just
doing
thought-
all of them at the end, so.
Thought might be able to tick one off positively and
Oh.
move on. Oh, I didn't listen. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, so 252. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair Story. So the restoration of Waikato Tainui settlement lands reflects the commitment to restoration of lands which were captured in the recently adopted strategy, Toitu Te Whenua, and the associated implementation plan, Mahia Te Mahi, which went before Council and the Co-Governance Committee in April this year. As part of the information put forward during the LTP and to the co-governors committee, there was a request from both the co-governance committee and council to better understand the resource requirements. And that's what this paper seeks to provide. So, and to support that, a further assessment. So that assessment was undertaken by staff, and we identified a delivery model of a 5-year period for those sites where we felt we could support restoration through planting and fencing. And we identified the budget from our existing budgets across biodiversity on scheme land, river care and community partnerships, and that was one of the requests, was to have a look at how we could utilise our existing budgets. So based on the funding provisions over that 5-year period, that would provide 36% of the funding requirement, and then there is the opportunity to apply for the remaining funding sought, through other funders such as Waikato River Authority and WASEAT as well. And within the paper, it also outlines other options which could be considered if there is a shortfall. So happy to take any questions with this one as well, and just note the additional information which is captured in the report on, from page 252.
Not sure who was first, or Councillor Nicol or Councillor Kneebone? Councillor Kneebone.
Oh. No, thanks, Sarah. Look, support this. Just curious, there's quite a few dollars involved in fencing. Has it not been fenced in the past, or is some of this land going to still be grazed? Is that what's driving the need for the fencing?
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct, that the majority of these lands are currently grazed. So the restoration lands, which form the focus of the strategy and implementation plan, are where the Waikato Tainui settlement lands are on council scheme land, so acquired as part of the public works. And we typically manage those as leases through land licence leases through adjoining landowners where there is grazing. And quite typically, the settlement lands form a smaller portion of the overall scheme area. So it may be that it's, let's say, 10% of a scheme area. So we would need to fence that from the grazed area.
Okay, no, that's what I suspected. I guess the only other thing I was wanting clarification on with, and look, I haven't been privy to the discussions in this part of the world for a few years, but there's often been that debate over whether grazing and or mowing, for cut and carry and all sort of stuff. And I just want to make sure that before we incur a whole bunch of fencing costs, there's not going to be any sort of policy changes where we're going to stop grazing some of it, if that makes sense. That was all, but yeah.
Yeah, so through the chair, in response to that, part of the implementation plan incorporates the regulatory requirements for PC1 and NPS fresh water. So we're working on those alongside each other, recognising obviously the interlinkages there, and so that we can, I think, take, a more holistic view as well. And part of the process, is, engagement with mana whenua and working through where those restoration priorities are and options. So hopefully that helps answer your question, Councillor Kneebone.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Nicol?
Could I ask for Councillor Mahuta to go first? I'm quite keen to hear a thought. And then
Councillor Mahuta?
Yeah.
Just on mute there.
Is that all right, Pamela?
Yep, good.
I don't want to yell at you guys down the mic. No. Firstly, thank you to Sarah and the team for working this up. It's been 10 years in the making, this process, and I just think it shows the same commitment to Waikato Tainui as new landowners under their settlement as we do to other established landowners in the catchment. And just noting, councillors might be asking, why is it not fenced, etc. It was scheme land that had become co-managed now. So it wasn't the tribe's role to do that all these years. It was ours as council. So just putting that one out there. But hey, look forward to more partnership processes with iwi. One thing I think that should be highlighted is access to the river as part of the brief, Sarah. So if these, I guess, just to give you a guide, areas that promote access to the river and traditional sites of significance will still be important in this whole process. Thank you.
Councillor Nicol?
Yes, thanks for that. And I'm really, as a member of the JMA as well, and having seen this finally come to fruition, it's quite overdue. Really good to see, and good to see what the numbers are. The thing that concerns me is that the biodiversity on scheme land budget is quite a small one, and you're looking at taking quite a lot out of that. What is that displacing? Same with, the community partnerships budget, etc. This is additional work that we're then trying to fit into the things we're already doing, which is great. But I'm just hoping that we do have enough in those budgets so that the things that we do aren't going to disappoint a whole lot of other people without us being aware of that impact. But that aside, I'm keen to ask you, Sarah, what your thoughts are, or if Tipa wants to chip in as well. The 64% funding contribution from a third party might be required. It seems to me that this being our responsibility to help deliver, it would make sense to come to the table with the ability to fund 50% in that first year at least. So, and I calculated that to make that happen would be about 30,000. So for example, if you boosted the biodiversity on scheme land budget by 30,000, we would be able, just for year one, we'd be able to rock up and say, we can meet the 5 years by working through what happens in future, but here we can contribute up to 50% in year one. Do you have any feedback, Sarah, on how, like, whether that's important or not? Well, because you say WRA or we seek funding, do they require 50% in order to get that, or? Because I don't want to fall back on just delaying everything further because we didn't fund it now, like year one at least now.
Through the chair, and yeah, good questions there, Councillor Nicol. In relation to, I guess, our funders' appetite for funding more than 50%, I will, I think, defer to others who are closer to that and representing the trust. But from my understanding, with this being an iwi priority within the restoration strategy, it does have a different co-funding model, but that's just based on my understanding, and that application would be through Waikato Tainui because they're iwi priorities or mana whenua rather than through regional council. And in terms of
Sorry, Sarah, carry on.
Oh, I was just going to note with the biodiversity on scheme land, I think that was the other question you asked Councillor Nicol and community partnerships in terms of what that would offset. Currently, the biodiversity on scheme land is focused on all activity that we undertake on scheme land. And this change with 50% of that the budget being used for restoration would, I guess, funnel, half of that work that we would typically do into scheme lands where they specifically is settlement lands. We have had the fund for a period of time, so we have been able to deliver on wider projects across scheme land as well. The community partnerships, we've utilised 50% of that because we recognise that it's really important to retain funding for other community-led restoration initiatives. But, obviously with directing 50% of that would reduce the opportunity for some of the other, community to apply for funding.
Thank you. And Tipper?
Kia ora, my only add, and again, we are the funders with that hat on, Jen, so I can talk about that in another space, but not as a councillor,
Yeah.
but for here. With my tribal hat on, given the major investment council made in the Waipā catchment with the River Authority, this isn't even scratching that in terms of priority catchment over the last few years. So as a constituent of the lower Waikato, we do feel underfunded and last. That's why it's taken 10 years, and even then we're not going to show up with half the money. That's as a tribal member. Okay, that's my opinion of it. As a councillor, I understand what we can afford.
Yeah.
But if we're leaning into this because the tribes are going to fund it through the River Authority, that's the wrong reason to do it. And that's not partnership.
Yeah, totally. And obviously I want to rock up to the JMA with the ability to follow through on what we've just agreed on that we're going to do. And I thought that 50%, at least for year one, to get us kicked off well, would by my measure, from my perspectives, be a good look. But so yeah, that opportunity to possibly put 30K in that first year and then figure out later, it's just something I wanted to put forward.
I've got Councillor Hughes and Councillor Smith. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to the members of our catchment committee that are here, I just want an assurance that this process is not going to impede in any way on the ability of council to carry out its statutory and service level agreements in terms of maintenance of the infrastructure assets that are inside these areas. I know what putting fences up and planting trees does to impede access to properties, and I just want to be assured that that's all been addressed in this plan. That there will be no issues for ongoing service delivery for council. Thank you.
It's an operation.
Sarah, do you want to make any comment to that?
Yes, certainly I can respond to that. So in the development of the strategy, which was a collaborative process across council and Waikato Tainui, we specifically note our duties under the Soil and River Controls Act and Drainage Act and the like, and the services that we need to deliver as part of that. So confident from what we have within that strategy that it recognises both the commitment to the Waikato River Settlement Act as well as the provisions of the Soil Conservation and River Controls Act.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Just going to bullet point 8, page 253. If the 64% funding is not found, does it mean the work won't be done, or will it need to be rephased and the budget adjusted over out years? I'm a little concerned that we have got this work. I think I was at the meeting where this, certainly I've read the papers, and it needs to be done. But to actually prepare a budget without having 64% of the budget secured is a wish and a prayer, really. It's and I'm not really sure that's good planning. So and I'm not sure if I got Tipper right, but the reality is just thinking that WRA or someone else will come to the party. So is this contingent on getting the money, the 64%, or if we can't, will we rephase it? What's the program and or
It's
option
contingent on
two?
Waikato Tainui. From what I understood, Sarah say, sorry, Noel, it's contingent on Waikato Tainui applying for the funding under their funding agreements, their priorities.
Right, sorry, I missed that.
that.
Thank you, Tipper, I missed that. Thank you.
So through the chair, in response to that, on page 256 of the agenda, point 30 outlines some of the options there if the funding is unable to be obtained or restricted to 50%. Which includes delivery of the restoration projects over a longer time frame. So we've currently identified that time frame to be 5 years. So we would have to extend that over a longer phase. Obviously, there's point 2 there, which is the provisional of additional budget in the long-term plan or the subsequent annual plan. Or lastly, greater utilisation of the existing budgets, although, as noted earlier, this is restricted by the total budget available. There's limitations in terms of what is available through the community partnerships budget or the biodiversity on scheme land budget, for example. So hopefully that helps with providing some response to the questions there.
All right. Nothing else on this matter? No? All right, so that's the end of the things to take into consideration, yes? Okay. Now we're going to adjourn and we're going to take a bit of time just to make sure if there's any other further points of clarification that so we're going to adjourn and I'm going to say indicative, maybe 1/4 past, but we'll see how we go. So meeting adjourned 10:49 a.m.